Hello everyone. I am Sarthak and with me is Prashik. And today we are going to have this open live discussion, podcast, talk, session, kind of whatever you would like to call it, with Dr. Siddharth Warrior. And this is from Baithak Podcast in collaboration with the Biotech Club of our institute. So we would like to thank the Biotech Club IIT Bombay to letting us do this and call Dr. Sid to our podcast and make this an institute level talk. So for those who don't know who Dr. Sid is, he's a neurologist and a YouTuber. And he has this very famous series called the Neuroscience of series. Like I would recommend each and every one of you to go and check that out. Like it's more than awesome. Like the amount of topics that he covers, like from love to dreams to consciousness, memory, even Among Us. Like he did a neuroscience of Among Us as well. So yeah, go and check that out. And
Yeah, that was done on a dare. Somebody said that, hey, you can't do a neuroscience of anything. I said, okay, let's see if we can do that.
awesome. And yeah, so in this podcast, what we're trying to aim is like give you a flavor of his vast intellect in this domain of brain and everything. So yeah,
Yeah.
I guess
Wow,
Prashik.
that's probably one of the nicest introductions I've ever got.
Oh,
Thanks,
thank you
man.
for that.
Appreciate that. Yeah, tell me.
Also
Prashik,
for
if
the
you would
audience.
explain the structure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also for the audience. So it's an open discussion kind of thing. That's why the name is Baithak. So you feel free to raise your hands for your doubts, queries, or even opinions related to the topic of discussion. What we'll do is, like, we have roughly 5 major topics of discussion, and at the end of each topic we'll just ask you guys to raise your hand. You can put it in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and ask the doubt to Dr. Siddharth right away. So I'll just put it in the chat what major topics we are going to cover. And yeah, so without wasting further time, let's start.
Sounds
So-
good. So just one thing, I don't have access to the chat right now. So, you
Oh.
can just take up questions and ask
sure,
me
sure.
at any point.
Sure.
right?
Also,
Cool.
like I've allowed people to unmute themselves. So
Mhm.
at the end of each topic of discussion, you can unmute and like give out your
Yeah, that
opinions or
sounds good.
maybe ask any queries. So let's start with the first topic of discussion. And we were thinking for a long time, like what to ask you, like what should be the first question. And there, like we saw a very bold statement on your YouTube page, which said that neuroscience is everything. Now, this was like, okay. And that particular statement instantly clipped me onto thinking this everlasting debate about materialism versus dualism.
Mm.
So what I want you to answer is, in this broad spectrum of materialism and dualism, like where do you lie and why? Also, like if you could expand it in terms of why do you think like neuroscience is everything?
Right. So one of the paradoxes of studying theoretical physics is when physicists try to understand the way the universe is built. So if you look at subatomic particles, if you look at anything, you will think that this is the fundamental particles of the universe. But those pieces of information are then flowing through your brain.
Yeah.
And your brain has to take in that information and process it in order to make it real for you. So this is a paradox that physicists face, that what is the fundamental science? Is it physics or is it neuroscience?
Okay.
Because what creates reality? Is it the subatomic particles, or is it our understanding of the subatomic particles? So that is a good base to base this discussion on, that when I say that neuroscience is everything, one of the easiest way to explain it is that everything goes through the brain before you realize it. So if I tell you, think of anything, as soon as I say that, the reason that that thing exists is because your brain has created it.
Yeah.
And that brings it under the realm of neuroscience. So everything is neuroscience in that respect, in the sense that
Yeah.
your brain has conceived of it. And think of it like a funnel, and the
Mhm.
whole of the universe is on one side and you're on the other side, and your brain is the funnel, and everything has to go through your brain to reach your consciousness. So neuroscience is that last filter through which everything has to go through, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
right? So
Yeah.
that's what I meant by neuroscience is everything, and everything is neuroscience. So if you look at the quote,
Yeah.
it's not a one unidirectional arrow, it's a bidirectional arrow.
Yeah.
So everything is neuroscience, and neuroscience is everything.
Hmm.
So that's
And what do
sort
you?
of what I wanted to convey from that.
Yeah. And what about this materialism and dualism?
Right. So I had thought a lot about. So first of all, just so that we are on the same page, when you say materialism and dualism, what do you mean by it?
In a very simple terms, materialism consists that matter is everything. Right?
Yeah.
We are made of matter, and that is everything. And when it comes to dualism, there is a possibility of soul as well, body and mind,
Hmm.
that they are different.
Yeah. So if you look at science, science does not accept the existence of the soul.
Yeah.
Science only looks at you can say that science is more materialistic, in the sense that we look at primary particles and we see how particles build onto one another. Now, what has happened is, what consciousness is, and therein lies the problem. वहां से ये soul का concept आया कि if you say that everything is atoms and everything is molecules, then what is the difference between a stone, a mobile, and a dog and a human being? Everything is molecules.
Yeah.
But at some point in that evolution, there was consciousness. So you can understand why the concept of soul came about. It is basically inanimate objects plus soul is equals to conscious objects. Inanimate object minus soul is like non-animal objects, right? So in that logical thinking, you have to add soul. So soul is that x variable. जब हम मैथ्स का इक्वेशन सॉल्व करते हैं और हमको पता नहीं होता कैसे इक्वलाइज करना है, तो we say कि let the variable be x.
Yeah.
So a is equal to x into b. So x is that unknown variable. So soul is that unknown variable. My personal take on this topic is that I feel consciousness is a spectrum. So when I say that a dog is conscious, and when I say I am conscious, and when I say that a virus is conscious, it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
There are grades of consciousness, and जितना complexity of consciousness increase होता है, उतना तुम्हारा what do you call so-called soul, that increases, right? And it is not outside the realm of science. It is just that our understanding of neuroscience is still limited, and that is why we are still unable to define it in terms of mathematical equations. But it is very much still in the realm of science. So I am very much in the camp of materialism. It is just that our knowledge of materialism is still inadequate. So there will be a time when we can understand consciousness much better, but it is not separate. That's what I'm trying to say. It is not separate from this world. It is just in this world, and our understanding is still limited.
Yeah.
Right?
But is it because like you've studied the brain a lot, right?
Yeah.
So does that pull you towards being a materialistic, like having a materialistic view? Because for the past 2 months now, I've been reading about brain and everything. I'm reading some books, etc. And I feel that I am getting pulled towards that side.
Yeah.
Like the more I study, I'm getting pulled towards that side, that things can be explained in terms of just the matter that is inside our skull.
Yeah, it can be, because what one thing I've noticed people doing is there is a dismissive attitude that, oh, it can be explained by the brain. But we don't understand the gravity of that situation, that sentence. Because when we say it is explained by the brain, we are basically saying it can be explained by an organ which has 1 billion cells talking to each other in 1 trillion synapses, and which has evolved over 13 billion years. I mean, if you consider evolution as starting from when Earth was formed, then it's maybe like 3-4 billion. But if you look at, say, Big Bang theory, say abhi tak, then it is 13.8 billion years. And everything had to happen for you and I to be sitting here and talking today.
Yes.
Right? It cannot exist in a vacuum. So our brain existed because 3 billion years ago, primordial unicellular organisms came. And they only came because there were molecules and atoms. So everything leads to the next step.
Yeah.
So for us to say that everything can be explained by science is not we should not take it lightly. It is such a huge thing. And consciousness is also a byproduct of that same biological process. Think of how much computing it will take for something to be conscious of itself. Like even computers still aren't conscious of themselves because our computational skills are not that developed yet. But we are not very far away.
Yeah.
Eventually, okay, I'll tell you what. I'll make it simple. How do you know you are conscious?
No idea.
Are you conscious?
Yeah.
You are conscious, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, somebody said EEG, and no. So there you are already complicating it way too much. How do you know you're conscious? Yeah, okay, Vaishnavi has a good answer. We can respond to stimulus. Exactly. Keep it very, very simple, guys. You can take in information from the environment, which is called stimuli. So you can take in information with your eyes, your nose, your skin, your ears. You can take in information and you can put out information. You can cause some change to happen in your environment and you can process that information in the middle. That's it, right? If you take out any one of this, your consciousness is questioned. So suppose you cannot take in any information. You can't see, you can't touch, you can't smell, you can't taste, you can't hear, right? Kuch bhi nahi hai. Then will you know that you are conscious? What will you feel? You will not feel anything. There is nothing. The universe does not exist for you after that. If you can't feel anything, right? And suppose you can feel everything, but you cannot influence the environment in any way. You can hear, touch, taste, everything. But the universe cannot be affected by you in any way. So no one can see you, no one can hear you, no one can touch you, and you cannot move anything around you. Then are you conscious? So these are thought experiments. These are called as thought experiments. So this is, if you go down these thought experiments, then you start realizing what is consciousness, what is the mind. And then you realize that a cockroach can also feel things, think about things, and influence the environment. So the cockroach is conscious, but a rock, it may be able to feel things, we don't know. It may be processing also, we don't know, but it is not able to influence anything around it. So we say that it is not conscious. Get it? So that is how we try to look at consciousness. And what is happening is there is increasing complexity of consciousness. As your brain processing power improves, your complexity of consciousness keeps on evolving. So at one point we say ये conscious है, और उसके नीचे का level we say conscious नहीं है. And there is a gray area. So there are things called as prion proteins, if you've heard of it. Prion. So prion proteins are those molecules that lie on the cusp of living and non-living. So anything less than that are just proteins. Like proteins are not conscious, but viruses are conscious. And on the cusp are prion proteins. They are proteins, but they sometimes act as if they have a purpose, and sometimes they act like they don't have purpose. So it's a spectrum, right? So that's sort of. So Prasoon has asked, viruses are living. So viruses, we do hold them as creatures with a sense of purpose, right? We don't talk about a rock having a sense of purpose, but viruses, I mean, in the middle of a pandemic, we definitely have to say, because we are talking about corona like it's a person in the room. So we definitely have to think of viruses as conscious. Yeah.
Acha, Prasoon is raising hand. Yeah, you can unmute yourself.
So a few of the things that I wanted to ask was, okay, what about the evolution of the limbic system and the evolution of the emotions? Because as per whatever we have known until date, the limbic system is known to be quite outdated in terms of evolution. And when it comes to the prefrontal cortex, it's quite evolved. So how do we explain that particular thing? That why is it that it's too outdated in terms of evolution? Why did that evolve as per time?
Word outdated is very, very wrong. Okay.
I mean, like it's past in the evolution. It's back to evolution. It did not evolve with the pace that prefrontal cortex actually evolved.
No. 1 second. It's not like the iPhone 1 is outdated because iPhone 12 has come. It's you think of it as a building. So the limbic system is on the first floor, and the prefrontal cortex is on the 8th floor or the 10th floor. But the prefrontal cortex cannot exist without the limbic system. So it's not outdated. It is just very, very old. So there's a difference. Outdated means we don't need it anymore.
No, I meant that it's old. The question that I wanted to ask as a follow-up was, when it comes to emotions, our logic does not defy our emotions. We cannot really control the emotions with our logic. So the basic logic that is given is this, that the limbic system is quite old in terms of evolution, and prefrontal cortex is pretty new, and the cortical region is actually basis for our logic that we usually go for. Why didn't this actually evolve with time? Why didn't the limbic system evolve exactly with the pace of the cortical region?
Okay. So look at it this way. The prefrontal cortex is a luxury. Okay. And there was a point in time when nature or living organisms was not able to extract the kind of resources from the environment in order to develop the prefrontal cortex. So it's like a cycle and egg thing. You need resources in order to be able to be more and more logical, and you need to be more and more logical to get more resources. So there was a time when everything was just about survival. Right from the unicellular organisms to fishes, to crocodiles, to snakes, to birds, to rats, to lions, up till chimpanzees, everything was just about survival. Eat or be eaten. And till that point, it was the limbic system that was keeping people alive. And it was the limbic system that was allowing species to reproduce and allowing life to continue, basically. And it is only when the chimpanzees, there was always a frontal cortex. There was always a frontal lobe, I think, right from rats onwards in terms of land creatures, and certain sharks and dolphins, of course, have a very developed prefrontal cortex. But prefrontal cortex does exist in other animals as well. But it is a matter of resources. So as humans went from being hunter-gatherers to this civilized society, we had the luxury of logic. We had the luxury of sitting down and coming with all these rules and regulations and society and government and politics and taxes. All of this is a luxury. Now, tomorrow, if there is a nuclear holocaust, and all your Wi-Fi is shut and we are all back in the jungle, we are going to be very much dependent on the limbic system again, right? So it is, think of it as the Maslow's pyramid. So in the bottom is limbic system and prefrontal cortex is more towards the top. So that's how evolution has also happened.
Is it just that? Because I do remember, I'm not sure. Just
tell me.
Just I could link is like there was a talk by Vidita Vaidya which actually stated primarily about energy as like cooking the food and how did it really, the number of neurons, and one of the paper was there. I have not read that, but from the talk itself, I'm just borrowing. The number of neurons that our brain can accommodate and the synaptic connections that we have exactly for today and the pruning that happens and the amount of energy that will be required. So cooking of the food actually gave this transition, like the energy requirement for this transition to happen. So this is what but my question was okay, if this was there, if prefrontal could evolve over time and if resources, okay, I mean, they could have evolved together as well.
No. So they did evolve together. So don't think of the prefrontal cortex as very, very different from the limbic for this discussion. The brain does what it has to, right? Now, imagine if you don't have the concept of stored food. Simple thing. There is no stored food. Every day, you don't know if you'll get food or not. That's what I mean by luxury. Then you don't have too much time for logic. All your instincts are guided by your primitive impulses of hunger. And that was what life was for majority of the time. And as you said, agriculture and the ability to store food and the ability to cook food has changed everything.
Yeah.
So, right? And it's not like animals don't store food. They also do that. Yeah. But think of the scale in which we have done it. The hunter-gatherers have done. And but if you've read Sapiens,
initially it was a fight or flight kind of thing, that either do or die. So that was quite logical. This was the situation. So this was the primary outcome. So, but now with the situation changing, like we have fat in our stomach as like belly fat, usually we do have that. And that's one of the evolutionary trait. That's one of the evolutionary trait that has come over time. Yeah. So now when the emotions, now it's that key, whenever there is a situation of anxiety, cortisol is released and we tend to do something which is not expected as a sensible human being. But we do that. And that's attributed to cortisol primarily. So I was just wondering that since now in particular situation, fight or flight mechanism is not always there. Like we are not always on our reflexes that this is the situation, we have to either act or just fly away. Why didn't it exactly? So in that particular situations, our emotions overwhelm, but we are not really able to control that emotions with our logic.
Got it. So I think I completely understand your question. And it's also very annoying when you think about it as evolved human beings, that why am I not able to control my emotions? What we need to appreciate is that it is a matter of time. So we are not talking at the end of the story. We are very much in the middle. In fact, we are at the beginning. So our cortical evolution has just started. In terms of the whole timeline of evolution, if you look at unicellular organisms and you look at monkeys, it's this big a line. And from monkeys to us is like a dot. So our cortical evolution has just started. So your complaint is very valid.
In that scenario, I'm like, okay, fine. I agree. In that situation, absolutely. I agree.
Because even the fact that we are able to talk about this is such a huge thing, because we have hardly had any time. So in the next, this actually brings me to a very interesting point. Suppose we just let evolution do its own thing. It might take another Just think of how long it took to evolve from chimpanzee to us. And this is a creature which has like 98% same genetics, 99%, I think. And from them to us, it took I think almost 55,000 years. Now, if you just let evolution do the next, I would have said that give it another 50,000 years. And the prefrontal cortex will be completely dominant over the limbic. Right? Because it takes time. The limbic has had almost a million years head start. You cannot expect कि 50 साल में हम लोग सब कुछ change करेंगे. But what is going to happen is we have created technology. And so there is going to be an exponential shift away from the limbic towards the PFC. So it is not going to be the same amount of time from monkey to us, from us to whatever is the next stage of evolution. It is not going to take that much time. So think of it as every other technology, from printing press to computer took what, 500 years, 1,000 years? And from computer to mobile took like 50 years. And from mobile to virtual reality goggles took 10 years. And now in the next 5 years, we are going to have Neuralink.
Yeah.
And every one year, there is going to be so much change. So all the audience listening, the changes that we are going to see in our lifetime is unimaginable. And we are born at a time when we are not used to that much change. So we are going to have some amount of trouble getting used to the kind of changes that are going to happen. Right? So the way we interact with the world, the way we interact with our brain, that is going to change.
Yeah.
So so what Prasanna was talking about is going to happen. PFC is going to win over limbic, and our human experience is going to change. It's going to be a fun time. I'm excited for it.
Yeah. So it's awesome, like the way we organically came to this topic, because this was going to be one of our topics of discussion.
Yeah, I thought so.
So let's just move on to the next question that we have been pondering a lot. Why are we we humans are at the pinnacle of evolution compared to other living organisms? What's so peculiar about us that we have evolved so intelligently compared to other animals? That was the questions.
So my honest answer is that it was trial and error.
Okay.
There is nothing very, very special about. Let's go back. Think about startups. Think about how when there must be like 100 startups. So the most energy is required in the initial bit to take off, and most startups will fail. But a few of them will succeed. And then whichever one makes it to the, say, 1 billion club, then from there to becoming a, conglomerate is not as difficult. So you know what they say, that if you are in absolute poverty, the first $1 million is the most difficult to earn. 1 million se 2 million karna is easier, but 0 se 1 million is very difficult.
Getting that kickstart.
Like if you have if you have no money, if you have no support, getting that first 1 million, you can imagine how difficult it is.
Yeah.
Which is it in different circumstances, we say it in different ways. You can call it privilege.
Yeah.
Right? You can call it a kickstart. You can call it, anything. You can call it a head start. So that is applicable in all fields. From 0 to 100 is difficult. 100 to 200 is easier. So in evolution also, that's what happened. There was a lot of trial and error. You can think of it as startups. Dolphin is a startup. Crocodile is a startup. Birds are a startup. Chimpanzees are a startup. And at some point, this clicked in terms of resource utilization. This is the key. Which animal is able to utilize its resources the best gets to win the race. And whichever one is ahead if you cross that critical line, then others will have like a lot of difficulty in catching up, because now you have a head start. So now humans have had such a head start that it is difficult for other species to catch up and become that cognitively good, because eventually everything is going to be the way humans want it. Right? So that is sort of my understanding. There are a lot of theories on this. Okay, so this is just something that I have thought about, and it's something that I feel. But yeah, that's my gut instinct. It could have also happened in the water. It, because there are creatures there are sea creatures that are, as they also, like dolphins especially, they have complex societies, they have conversations, they have relationships, they have rules, regulations, and they work together, they cooperate. But at some point they could not use the resources of the environment as well as we could.
Yeah.
And that therein lies the problem.
Fair enough.
Also, like, do you think if there were like what do I say, we are going we have a line of evolution, right? This Homo sapiens, like a lineage, right? If there existed two such lineages at a time at the pinnacle of the evolution, would that society exist? For example, there are birds similar to the cognitive level of humans, and they are forming their societies as well.
So birds have their own set of cognitive skills, but of course theirs is more about movement and balance and all that. There are very few other creatures that have the cognitive capacity to utilize the environment as well as humans can. And the truth is that if there is another species, and this is of course like very hypothetical, but if there is another species that is as cognitively advanced, then chances are that they will be a threat to us. We will automatically think of them as a threat to us, because the reason I'm saying this is because there are limited resources.
Yeah.
So even in human beings, forget other species, even within human beings, at a time when resources were less, think of the amount of violence that happened. How many humans killed each other for resources?
Yes.
If there is another species taking it, of course you would go all out. There is nothing holding you back. And this is where the limbic system kicks in, because it's survival over everything else. So if another species is claiming the same resources that you want, then it is a threat. So then you will go for violence.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's right, wrong, all of that. I'm just, talking about how evolution works. Yeah.
So the way we were talking about the speeding of evolution, and all those things. So let's like discuss about the monkey in the room, which is the video released by Neuralink 2 days ago. Like, what was
what
happening?
A beautiful video. What a beautiful video.
Like, in that, what was Neuralink doing? What was the monkey doing?
So what Neuralink was doing was, when you raise your hand, there are certain neurons that fire in your brain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And those, so when those neurons fire, your hand is raised. Or if your other neurons fire, your thumb is pressed. Okay. So when you are playing a game and you want to turn right, your thumb has to go right. So for your thumb to go right, there are certain neurons that have to fire. So what is happening is, your neurons fire, your thumb goes right, the joystick moves right, that joystick takes the signal to the computer, and the computer your character moves to the right. Now, what if I can cut out the middleman, which is the thumb, and connect my neuron directly to the computer. So when the neuron fires to make my thumb go right, the computer directly reads my neuron and the character goes to right. And I am looking at the screen, I'm not looking at my thumb. So as far as I'm concerned, my thumb did go to the right because the effect was there. I can see it. And the feedback loop is complete. I wanted the character to go to the right, and so it went to the right. So I don't need my thumb anymore. And that is what happened with the monkey. So initially the monkey was moving the joystick and Neuralink recorded all the neurons that were firing. And later on, it directly connected those neurons to the computer and removed the joystick. And eventually the monkey was just keeping its hands like this because it realized that I don't need to move it. The reason that we have hands is to move objects in your environment. It is to manipulate objects in the environment. And the reason we needed hands was because we don't have telekinesis. But now we have telekinesis, which is so freaking unbelievable to say, but we do.
Yeah.
So that's what happened. So now neurons are directly able to talk to computers. If you've have you seen this cartoon called Centurions?
No.
I don't know. Maybe it's I'm revealing my age here, but when I was a kid, there was a cartoon called Centurions, and the idea was that machines, it was cyborgs. So there were men who would call upon machines to sort of, they become like Iron Man, and they would go about their adventures. So there was this concept of how fighter planes don't have fighter pilots. So fighter planes will be controlled through the mind of somebody sitting on the ground. And so you don't actually need people trained in fighting, like flying fighter planes. You actually need really good gamers. So they have gamers sitting on the ground with a helmet on, and they are controlling 4-5 planes at once. And it is actually a video game, because then everything becomes a video game. So now you can strategize, you can coordinate all your pieces at once, and you can make all your planes fly in a way that 5 different humans flying those planes can never coordinate. So the advantages are huge. And plus, no lives are lost. Even if one plane goes down, no lives are lost. So so when I was seeing that monkey video, all these things were going through my mind, that the next 10 years is going to see all these things.
But is it really like just like playing a video game? Because I remember having a conversation with Professor Aziz Khan, a faculty of IIT Bombay, and he had a friend in Argentina. He was saying that that fellow colleague of his is trying to develop something wherein he's going to teach children just by thinking, right? Some sort of similar thing. So in that, even that makes this and that situation, both are kind of similar, and that makes me think, is it as easy as playing, will it be as easy as playing a video game, or will it be like you need a calm mind to do something like this, right? You just, like, for me, if I imagine I have a very disturbed mind, I think about this, I think about that, I think about that, how can I control something with my mind?
Do you play games?
Hardly.
So professional gamers are actually some of the calmest people you will meet. Because when you are playing a game, a computer game, say Counter-Strike or Valorant or PUBG or whatever, the amount of things that you have to control at the same time and think about at the same time are huge.
Yes.
right? And you have to take in so much information. You have to strategize. You have to move your hands. You have to look here and there. And at the same time, your reflexes have to be so good, because as soon as you see an enemy, your thumb is already shooting almost before you have realized that you've seen it. Like that is how quick their reflexes are. Now, any physical sport requires the same kind of loops, whether it's football or whether it is fighting a war on an actual battlefield, requires the same amount of brain activity. You need to be very quick. You need to take responses quickly and all of that. The only thing is that if you are playing a game, you are not afraid of actually dying. Right? Like your physical harm is less. But even then, you are still scared because when I'm playing shooter games, I still get that palpitation. I still get that adrenaline rush. But I know that I'm actually not going to die. So that is very, very interesting, because then you actually take more risks. You can play in a way, or you can perform in a way that you may not do in real life.
Yeah.
And there your productivity might be better. You may be even more efficient. You may be pushing the limits even more. So I would say that somebody who is doing these things like they would in a game might perform better than actual people doing it in a real world scenario. But this is, of course, like hypothetical. I'm trying to visualize it happening, but this is what my gut instinct tells me. Yeah.
And what do you think? How are we going to incorporate a machine into ourselves?
In a way, we already have, because our phones are with us all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And we no longer feel lost. We never feel like we don't know anything. I don't know if you ever remember a time when we are stuck somewhere and we don't know how to get home, or we want to know the capital of a country and we wonder, how can I know this? Like that thought is not there anymore. You know that you can know anything, you can look up anything, you can order anything, you can see anything. So we are already very comfortable with the idea that we have access to a lot of information. The only thing is that the bandwidth, so the way your brain is connected to the phone, it is still very much limited by how quickly you can type. Right? Because that's the way that your brain communicates with this device. So this is called as bandwidth. So your Wi-Fi is 2 Mbps. No, your Wi-Fi is 1 Gbps. But your brain to your phone is still 20 Mbps. Because that's how quickly your thumb can type. Suppose the connection between your brain and your phone is also 1 Gbps. Now think about the way that you would interact with your phone. Think of the information transfer. Think of the amount of information that you can send and receive. Because now we are limited by this connection. Me to the phone is the limiting factor. Phone to other phones is really quick. So this is what brain-computer interfacing means. Right now, the thumbs are the brain-computer interface. But if you have a Neuralink, or there will be other companies also, but this link is going to get faster. That's all. That's the only difference, basically.
Okay, so Acha, there is something. People are raising their hands.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Aman.
Yeah, I said hello.
Hi, Aman.
Hi. First of all, this feels great to have you here. So, I have two simple questions. One is regarding the patterns. So, what I think is our brain is actually whenever wherever it is, right from finding solution to any problem or connecting two different things, our brain is constantly trying to create some patterns and the more good the pattern is, the more like we can come up with more creative solutions. So
Yeah.
like I'm wondering ki how can we hack this like system ki like we are coming up with more and more patterns, more and more ways to go from A to B, as you said in your neuroscience of like marijuana with Tanmay Bhatt. So like when you are in that state, so you create new paths of going from A to B. So when you are in this state, how can we like actively provoke by doing some things to actually go to that state where we are constantly good at finding new patterns? I guess for one thing can be like by like people suggest to learn new skills like any art form like guitar or anything that triggers new parts of your brain. So what according to you are some more areas where we can like take this to even better level of finding new patterns?
Got it. Okay. Think of it like 4 dots. Okay. If there are 4 dots, each dot is a neuron. Now, every line that you draw between 2 dots or 2 neurons is a synapse. Okay. Now, how many shapes can you make from those 4 dots? You can use only 1 dot, you can use 2 dots, so you can use all 4 dots. That is up to you. But how many shapes can you make from those 4 dots? Now, when I said 4 dots, all of you must have thought of a square, right? Because that's what first comes to you. Because my hand also moved like this, so there is a subliminal messaging. Your brain must have seen this hand gesture. And when I say 4 dots, it's immediately that you think of 4 corners. And all of these are triggers for you to think of a square. But now, try and think of other ways of connecting those dots. And then you will realize that any number of neurons can connect to each other in different ways. Now, if you are very rigid, then you will say that 4 dots is a square and nothing else. It cannot be anything else. But somebody might say that, what if I connect only 3? Then it's a triangle. What if I connect only 2? Then it's a line. What if I connect all 4, but I don't make straight lines, I make curved lines? Then it's a circle, right? And if I make an elliptical circle, so on and so forth. You can make this into anything you want. And the more imaginative you are, the more patterns you can see. And the reason that people tell you about guitar and about other art forms is this is what art does. This is the basis of art. Art is taking something that is pre-decided, fixed, ki ye matlab ye hai, and it is removing that rigidity and trying to see it in a different way. And it is trying to see how all these dots can connect together in a new way. That is art. That is creativity. The best example, I think, is poetry, because words are something that all of us are familiar with. We use it all day, every day. But poetry takes those same words, the same concepts, and turns it around. Looks at words differently, looks at meanings differently, looks at different ways of saying the same thing, or looking at saying the same thing but meaning a different thing. So poetry explores that in words, and painting and sculpture and all of that uses the same concept. So you see different patterns. The best way to do it is by practice, because rigidity is very comforting. So when we say that ye aise hi hona chahiye, then that is in a way very comforting. You know that your world is like this, which is why a lot of older people have trouble seeing new things. So when they hear something that they're not comfortable with, they may get very angry. Whereas younger people are more open to new ideas because their thoughts aren't become very rigid yet. So the key word is neuroplasticity. Try to maintain neuroplasticity, try to maintain neurofluidity. Try to keep reminding yourself that things can be looked at in a different way. And you can use this in anything, whatever is your career field, whatever is your hobby, whether you're a chess player, whether you're a poker player, whatever it is. you can use this concept and just try and visualize it in more and more and more ways.
Yeah, so the best thing is to throw yourself in that arena and to practice it in different angles.
Yes, try to
And-
make yourself a little uncomfortable.
Also, I had a question on some different lines. As I'm more into the coding and deep learning and computer science part. So there was a breakthrough when we discovered like deep learning, like that is basically imitating our own brains. Our architecture of the brain was the information travels through neurons and then linking the weights and biases and everything. But I have like almost done a lot in deep learning, and I constantly think about is like there now, and still we haven't achieved artificial general intelligence. That might be an that might be a resistance due to we do not have enough time to let that evolve. We do not have that much processing powers, and but there is also remains one unidentified thing which I think most of the time about. What if we haven't we haven't discovered the perfect architecture yet? Till now, we think the architecture of the brain is the simple neurons who are connected to each and everyone, and then the information travels. Some of the like one neuron remembers something, then that is passed on to different, etc., etc. But what if there is a different architecture and which we haven't looked up to? So, what are your thoughts on some different architectures of the brain, which like on
right? So the gross architecture we already know. We know that there are some parts of the brain with 3 layers, there are some parts with 6 layers. The complexity comes in because it is not a unidirectional path. So every neuron both goes down and